When the land was crushed by foreign rule, when peasants carried tribute cloth like chains across their backs, one man, dark-skinned, born of the fields, rose and dared to call himself king. He had no palace, no crown, only the will of his people. This is the story of Mai Hac, the first common man in Vietnam's history to shoulder the dream of freedom. In a poor village of Hoan Chau, where the Lam River quietly flowed past rice fields and bamboo groves, a child was born under a moonless night. The child had dark skin, curly hair, and an unusually strong frame. Some villagers whispered he was a child of the gods. Others said he was a bad omen. But his gentle mother simply smiled and said, "My son is no curse. He carries a great dream." That child was Mai Thuc Loan, later known as Mai Hac, the Black Emperor. He grew up in poverty. His father died early, and he lived with his mother in a straw hut. Each day they carried cloth on their backs for wealthy landowners in exchange for rice. Young Mai was known not just for the heavy cloth bundles he bore, but for his eyes that refused to bow. Once, at the market, he watched a Chinese officer whip an old Vietnamese woman for failing to meet her cloth quota. Mai clenched his fists, gritted his teeth. When his mother pulled him away, he only asked, "Why must our people bow to strangers?" He never went to school, but through carrying cloth from village to village, he heard the stories of old, of the Trung sisters, of Li Nam Day. Every tale was like a drop of fire soaking into his soul. He trained in secret, throwing spears made of bamboo, running rivers, climbing rocks. No master taught him. His will was his teacher. Then his mother died. On her deathbed, she grasped his hand and said, "If you can, let me die knowing our people can one day walk with pride." Her death lit the final spark. The next day, Mai burned his last bundle of cloth, stabbed it into the earth, and swore, "From this day I carry no more fabric, I carry the dream of a nation." He began gathering brave souls, farmers who knew martial arts, scholars who could lead, men once broken by injustice. In the sacred forest of Ru Dun, he built a secret camp. At first there were dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. The countryside echoed with the sound of wooden swords, battle cries, and the clash of metal as if a storm was forming in the heart of the green hills. And so, from a common man of the people, Mai Thuc Loan began planting a golden dream in a poor land, a dream of a country where no one bowed to Chinese officials, no one paid tax in cloth, and no one knelt out of fear. The air in central Vietnam grew heavy with despair. Peasants bent under the weight of tribute cloth. Meals were made of rice water, and every drumbeat from the Tang offices meant more taxes, more fear. But deep in the Ru Dun forest, a fire was growing stronger each day. Mai Thuc Loan had built a humble military camp of bamboo and palm leaves. There were no kings, no court, only people united by one sacred dream to drive out the Tang and reclaim their ancestors' land. He did not crown himself. He called himself a cloth bearer. But when he stepped before his people, he held high a massive black flag and swore a vow. "This flag is the blood of the common folk. As long as it flies, no Vietnamese shall bow." The rebellion began. Starting in Hoan Chau, the army stormed district offices where tribute cloth was stored. They dragged bundles into the square, doused them in oil, and set them ablaze. Flames rose into the sky, fueled by generations of humiliation. Chinese officers were executed, seals of the Tang Dynasty tossed into rivers. But this time the people did not run. This time the people stood. Farmers wrapped black scarves around their heads, armed with bamboo spears. Drums thundered in the forest night. Village after village rose. District after district joined the cause. Within months, the rebellion had swept through Nghe An, Thanh Hoa, Ninh Bình, and beyond. Over 65,000 had joined what they called the Black-Clad Army. They had no uniforms, only the color of soil, sweat, and fury. Then one rainy day, in front of the assembled ranks, wearing black cloth, standing barefoot in the mud, Mai Thuc Loan declared himself king. His title, Mai Hac, the Black Emperor. No throne, no palace, but he said, "I am king because the people call me king." And they say on that very night, despite the storm, the black flag danced in the wind, untouched by rain, as if the heavens themselves approved. When the black-clad army had grown to tens of thousands and the southern provinces were free of Tang control, Mai Hac made a decision no Vietnamese had dared dream in centuries. He would march on Tong Binh, the Tang capital, the heart of foreign rule. On the eve of departure, he gave no royal decree, no speech of glory. He stepped before his army, holding a torn black flag, and said, "Tong Binh is not a fortress, it is a shackle. We march not to conquer a city, we march to break our chains." The black-clad troops moved swiftly through the northern plains. From Nghe An to Ninh Binh to Nam Dinh, villagers laid out mats, gave rice, oxen, and drums to the cause. For the first time in centuries, the hearts of the people beat in unison. Outside Tong Binh, modern-day Hanoi, the Tang forces stood ready. High walls, deep moats, crossbowmen, stone catapults, but Mai's army did not fight with brute force. They cut off supplies, they waited, they let the city eat itself. After more than a week, on a foggy night, a northern gate creaked open. A local forced to serve the Tang had betrayed his masters. The Black Army slipped in, snuffed out torches, cracked spears, and struck at the command center. The battle was brief. Tang officials fled. The black flag rose high over the central tower, where once the dragon seal of China had flown. At dawn, the people awoke not to the sight of red Tang uniforms, but to a dark-skinned man on horseback, wearing cloth, not silk. He said nothing, but his silence declared what no trumpet could. He was king. He set his capital in Van An, modern Nam Dinh, formed a court, reduced taxes, opened granaries, rebuilt dikes, and in every court session he wore his black peasant robe. When asked why he refused royal garments, he replied, "My people don't wear silk. I don't deserve gold." Mai Hac didn't just seize a city. He seized back the faith lost for generations. And in that moment, the Vietnamese people had a true king, one born of the people, like living among the people, ruling for the people. News of the fall of Tong Binh struck the Tang court in Chang'an like thunder. No emperor could bear the shame of losing a province to a dark-skinned rebel born of cloth and common blood. The imperial court acted swiftly. They summoned the seasoned general Yang Siju to crush the uprising. An army of 30,000 elite troops, war horses, siege weapons, and supply trains marched across the border like a tidal wave. Mai Hac knew this was no skirmish. This was war. Yet he did not flee. He built fortifications from Tong Binh to Van An, splitting his army into small units scattered across hills, forests, and riverbanks. Rather than defend cities, he waged guerrilla war, ambush, retreat, strike again. They used felled trees to block roads, dug pits, burned bridges. Every step the Tang took was a struggle. On some nights, the forest echoed with war horns and drums from every direction. Then silence. The Tang soldiers grew tired, afraid, lost. But then came the rains. Supplies ran thin. The rebels grew weary. Worse still, former Tang officials betrayed Mai, feeding intel to Yang. Eventually, the Tang discovered his main base at Van An. The final battle was savage. The black-clad army fought like cornered beasts. Every man chose death over surrender. Mai Hac was badly wounded. His followers carried him deep into the forest. His fate remains a mystery. Some say he died of his wounds. Others claim he escaped to a neighboring land. But the people believed the Black Emperor never died. He became one with the land, the wind, the sky, to forever walk beside his people. Mai Hac was never seen again after the Battle of Van An. No body, no grave, only a torn black flag standing atop a hill and a legend that began to echo across Nghe An. They say he did not die. He became the forest, the cloud, the wind that moves through the rice fields. Some swear that on quiet nights, they still hear the sound of hooves and war horns deep in the woods, as if he still patrols the borders of his people. He left behind no throne. He couldn't keep his kingdom. But Mai Hac lives on, in the hearts of the people. He built no palace, raised no temple, but in Nam Dinh, his village, there's a humble shrine under thatched roof. And every full moon, villagers light incense and whisper he was the king of the common folk. His tale passed through generations, told by grandmothers beside cooking fires, repeated by warriors before battle. If Mai Hac dared to rise when he had nothing, then why should we kneel when we already have our homeland? More than 1,000 years have passed, but his shadow remains. Etched into rice fields, into the hills of central Vietnam, into the sweat of every Vietnamese soul still walking the path of freedom. He proved one truth: you don't need a crown to be a king, you just need to live a life for the people. His shadow remains. He could not keep his throne, but he preserved something greater, the belief that freedom was worth rising for. In every hill, every rice field, and every heartbeat of resistance, he still lives, because not all who wear crowns are kings, and not all kings are born in palaces. Some are born from the will of the people. When the land was crushed by foreign rule, when peasants carried tribute cloth like chains across their backs, one man, dark-skinned, born of the fields, rose and dared to call himself king. He had no palace, no crown, only the will of his people. This is the story of Mai Hac, the first common man in Vietnam's history to shoulder the dream of freedom.